Our text this morning will primarily be in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and the parallel account of Titus chapter 1. Continuing the lessons from last week and concerning elders. 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1 lay out the qualifications of an elder. Our text for this morning there that was read, 1 Timothy chapter 3. And what we want to look at here this morning. And then this evening we'll look at the others. The experience of the man, the home, and his habits. And let me say, first of all, to study these for yourselves. You must know what they mean. You must understand the qualifications yourself of one who is to be considered to be an elder. And these are by no means an exhaustive or comprehensive list of all that the man should be. These must be coupled and harmonized with what Paul writes to the Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23, talks about the things of the fruit of the Spirit. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 through 16, there he says, as God's elect, put on these things, those characteristics that he lays out there. And also 2 Peter chapter 1 and verses 5 through 8, as all Christians, these characteristics that we should all possess, and those things that we're to add to our faith. It can be positively asserted, I believe, and this sustained that only divine wisdom could have produced the qualifications of an elder necessary to one to function properly in the eldership of the Lord's church or in the Lord's church. Human wisdom, as it so often does, can add to these qualifications. Human wisdom, and likewise, can also take away from these qualifications that God has set. God's qualifications that he lays out to here in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1 are perfect for the responsibility in that aspect. A very vital aspect of the eldership touches the qualifications that these men must possess before serious consideration is given toward a formal appointment. It is paramount that if that serious consideration must be taken. These details, as outlined in 1 Timothy chapter 3 here, our text, and this evening our text will look at and back here in 1 Timothy as well, but laid out in Titus chapter 1. These qualifications are kind of divided into 4 sections. Experience in life, domestic relations, his character, and his habits of life. He must possess all of these qualifications. So to begin with, the qualifications of an elder in respecting or relating to his experience in life. Verse 2 of 1 Timothy chapter 3, as that says there, he's supposed to be apt to teach. The apt there suggests that one is intelligent, is informed, is knowledgeable, is discerning, is wise, is alert, rational, and overflowing with common sense. An apt teacher is a person who possesses everything that would fit him for teaching, including the willingness to teach. The man who occupies this office, not only to be involved in teaching, but was skilled in it. This skill was especially needed because it would ordinarily be his responsibility to instruct believers and to refute false teachers. It would enable him to both understand and to communicate the truth of the Scriptures to others, and also to refute those who mishandle the truth, used both in public settings as well as private. The Christian life is a life of learning and a life of study. An ill-informed elder and a contradiction in terms there. Every elder should be able to, as Paul puts it, to shut the mouths of the gainsayers. We'll talk more about what that means later on. Shield the church from false teaching. And see to it that truth and truth alone is fed to the flock. The word there, or the phrase, they're apt to teach, also carries with it the idea that he has already been teaching. If you look over in Titus chapter 1 and verse 9, going along with what Paul says here of holding or apt to teach. Verse 9 says he's to hold or holding to the faithful word which is according to the teaching, that he may be able to both to exhort in sound doctrine and to convict the gainsayers. Holding forth, which is according to the teaching. The word in this verse, we talked about this last week in the lessons last week. The word there is taken to mean the overseer's preaching and teaching. There are many who believe that this is the Titus account here, and holding to the faithful word is a commentary on being apt to teach. He is to be concerned with having a firm grasp of the unchanging message, to defend and to urge acceptance of the word. According to the teaching, this is what we kind of talked about last week. We'll remind ourselves here of this. According to the teaching is a prepositional phrase for and modifying the word, the noun, the word, holding firmly to the trustworthy word, which is in harmony with the teaching. And then also it modifies the adjective faithful. He must hold firmly to the word that is faithful in regards to its teaching. The primary duty of the elders is to watching over and protecting the flock. This requires this man to be a student of the Bible, having a broad knowledge of the Bible, of what it is and what it is not, what it is and what is not sound doctrine. Elders are not to be liberal in theology, not to be a change agent, but sound in doctrine. He should be able to, the second part there of Titus chapter 1 and verse 9, able to exhort, able in sound doctrine, and to convict the gainsayers. The purpose for which he is to hold fast the word. Hold fast, or holding to, or holding forth. Hold fast by teaching, that he may be able to exhort and to refute. Referring to, again, the body of teaching which he has received, and not this the word that in there, and looking back at 1 Timothy chapter 3 there as well, not the action of his teaching, which he is to do. The word is in harmony with the teaching he has received. That he is able to exhort and to convict here. This shows why an elder must be apt to teach and must possess an accurate and extensive knowledge of the truth of the Scriptures. Both, the words that are used here, both and, there in Titus chapter 1, indicate a prominence for exhort and refute. By, the word by and in, indicate the means in which the exhortation is needed, the element the exhortation takes place. Paul later gives further information regarding the particular gainsayers, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, of the ones he had in view here. Apart from that, there are evil and seductive teachers in all generations of this world who exercise their talents for private gain. And in doing so, there is much damage to be done to the church. An eldership not having sufficient ability in the Scriptures or knowledge in the Scriptures will not be able to exhort and to convict these gainsayers. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, and in verse 6, it says he is not to be a novice. Not to be a novice. Not a new convert, but a man that is mature in faith. Remembering, too, that the term elder carries with it as well the idea of age and experience. How is this connected then to the preceding requirements? The previous causatives in verses 2 through 3, of which are dependent upon the words in verse 2. This man is a novice, as Paul here to Timothy, consists of a final negative qualification. This qualification then makes a shift from the candidate's family status to his experience in the faith. It leaves the subject of virtues and conduct to add a qualification that is based upon time. The time between his conversion and consideration for the office. It's only found in the New Testament here. But it is found repeatedly in the Septuagint. And in its literal sense, it is used in this the Septuagint of a tree or a plantation that is newly planted. The word is neophyte, or recently converted or received into the church. A person, the meaning of this, the Greek word here, a person is not yet fit to be a ruler and a teacher of brethren. And as Paul begins there, verse 6, he's not a novice, and then he lays out the succeeding words there. He lays out then the reason. He says, lest being puffed up, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Puffed up is peculiar to Paul's letters. It's from the Greek word typhos. And in its noun meaning, it means smoke or vapor, delusion or vanity or nonsense. The idea of the word used here seems to be a lightness. And the emphasis and elation. So the elder then is not to be, we might say in our English language, prideful or arrogant. Lest he be puffed up. Having been conceited. As some translations will have in there. To be filled or enveloped by smoke is what that means. It became an idiom for being conceited or being blinded or foolish. The metaphor used of the clouding of the mind and judgment of a person as a result of him becoming conceited because of a rapid advancement. If a recent convert is in such a position, his pride may cause his spiritual alertness to be blinded, and he will become morally blind. The result, the end of verse 6, that he will fall into the condemnation of the devil. The result will be the judgment that the devil received from God. The conceited behavior or the conceited overseer will be judged by God in the same way that the devil was judged by God. Paul begins there in chapter 3 of verse 1. Faithful is the saying, if a man seeketh the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. One must want to. One must be willing to go through the difficulties of shepherding the flock. It must be desired for the right reason. The meaning of if a man desire or seeketh the office there means if one aspires. In its verb form, it means to eagerly desire to accomplish a goal. Peculiar, again, to Paul's letters. He uses the same Greek word here in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10, where he's talking about the love of the money is the root of all evil, and he uses the word covet after. That's the same Greek word that is used here in chapter 3 and verse 1. But it is also used by the Hebrew writer in the Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 16, that was used as desire after. This is a common term that is used in the classical Greek. The noun of this, the Greek orexis, used by Paul in Romans chapter 1 and verse 27, where he's talking about homosexuality, meaning having an appetite, a desire, an eager desire or longing or craving for. The word is used both in a good sense and used in a bad sense as well, as we can see there in Romans. He must set his heart up on it. To greatly, meaning that to greatly desire something or to have something. The elder, first of all, as he mentions here, he must desire, have a willing heart, want a heart that is longing for it, that is craving for it. It must be done, again, for the right reasons. If there is no desire of a man to have or to hold this office or to be an elder in the Lord's church, if there is no desire, would there be any point of looking further into what the qualifications God sets out? We turn our attention here now to the domestic relations of this man. Chapter 2, or chapter 3 and verse 2, he lays out there, the husband of one wife. Some of these going forward here are ones that, all of them, of course, but study for yourself. Because there are varying schools of thought on what these phrases mean. In the Greek, it literally means a man of one woman. The idea that an elder is to scripturally have to have one wife. Remembering and keeping in mind as well that death and adultery are the only scriptural grounds for why one may remarry. Matthew 19 and Romans chapter 7. But what is meant by this phrase of one wife, or husband of one wife? The thought behind this of some is that the elder is to have only one wife in his lifetime. And it would prohibit remarriage after his first wife has died. There's evidence from literature of writers, history, and historians of that time, in both pagan and Jewish sects, indicating that remaining unmarried after the death of a spouse or a divorce was considered exemplary, while remarriage then was taken as a sign of weakness and self-indulgence. The man or men that are to be considered for this office are expected to be exemplary in their conduct. The word wife is used in an extended sense. Another school of thought is that an overseer must not have any other sexual partners besides his legal wife, prohibiting then adultery. An elder or overseer must be entirely faithful to his wife. That was not an act as the pagans often did by having immoral relationships with other women. What Paul says, the husband of one wife. Now, considering the time that Paul wrote in as well, that of the pagan society where it was accepted and it was a practice to have more than one sexual relation. God prohibits that in other passages. That the husband and wife relationship, they are to be one, they're to be faithful to one. So the elder then cannot have the mindset that I can have more than one relationship. Looking down in the verse in Titus, over in Titus with me as well, concerning domestic relationships. Verse 6. The latter part of verse 6, having children that believe, who are not accused of riot or unruly. First of all, children, the word children, can be translated either singular or plural. It means the same in the Greek language. Titus, in chapter 1 and verse 6, having children that believe, who are not accused of riot or unruly. Now, the two schools of thought on this are that his children must be Christians. The other school of thought is that his children are to be faithful, which the believing there is translated faithful, faithful to the father, their physical father. But there is also some thought in here as well. First of all, that some have said and say that it does not mean that an elder must have children. It is generally the man who is to be considered generally would mean a married man. So it would be assumed that most of his children, or all of his children, that they must be believers or faithful. Going back to the thought then of that the children must be, his children must be Christians. It is said that it means that their children are to be Christian believers, having children who are Christian believers. It means that their children must be faithful to God. But then the other side of the coin that says that their children are to be faithful and trustworthy to the Father. And they explain that by the latter part of that verse, who are not accused of riot or unruly. Some translations will say there that is not in accusation of profligacy or insubordination. And what that refers to then is the children who are not able to be accused. Profligacy is the content of the accusation, not being liable to the accusation. It means, the word itself, it means that to be self-indulgent or wasteful. Debauchery, as some translations will say there. And sensuality of all various kinds of living, wild living. Disorderly behavior, excessive indulgence in sexual pleasures or sensual pleasures as well. The word there is the second word, insubordinate, is connected with and is dependent directly upon not accused. It's parallel to profligacy. It means to refuse to accept parents' authority, to be disorderly in public, and also to be disobedient to civil officials. In Timothy's account, or Paul's account to Timothy, verse 4, he says that one that ruleth his house well, having his children in subjection with all gravity. And then verse 5 is a parenthetical statement, which says, but if a man knoweth not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? In connection with the thought that it is children to be believed or faithful to the parents, to the father, to his authority, and in consideration with that the thought that his children are to be Christians, the elder has the responsibility of the care of the souls of the church. Does that mean that he is responsible for the souls of the church? Does it mean, and then in conjunction with his children, does that mean that he is responsible for the souls of his children? Again, I cannot emphasize enough, study these for yourself. Paul tells the Philippians in Philippians chapter 2 and in verse 12 that we are to work out our own salvation. But his children in Titus, that is written there in Titus, says not accused of riot or disorderly behavior or disorderly conduct. Then back to Timothy. In Timothy's account here, 1 Timothy chapter 3 that Paul is writing. Having his children in subjection. But he begins there as one who rules or manages his house well. This qualification then is seen clearly in verse 5, in that parenthetical statement. Managing or ruling his own house well would prove his ability to take care of the Lord's work. He must be the head of his house, and he must rule it well. The clause in here, and so some translations and the meaning in there, managing his own household well, is translated that he must be a good family leader. He must be outstanding in his direction of his home. He must be in control of their own families. In the verb form of that, it means to influence others so as to cause them to follow a recommended course of action. So what is the significance of this phrase then? What is the significance of this man and that he is to manage his own household well? Well, it relates that to just simply his administrative capabilities. Before managing the household of God, he must show that he can manage his own household. His leadership, his caring abilities are shown by his management of his own house in the aspects of ruling, directing, and leading it. Managing denotes ruling over, governing, caring for, and being concerned about the household. The direction and the management of his household is also it has the idea of caring for it. It is an effective exercise. An exercise of authority that is accompanied by sensitive compassion. And in chapter 3 and verse 5 here, 1 Timothy, the role of managing is accompanied by caring for, suggesting that his leadership is accomplished more by showing mercy than by delivering ultimatums. So how here is this clause, or have verse 5, and then verse 4, having his children in subjection and all gravity, how is it related then to, how are these things all interrelated with one another? Well, this clause gives a specific example of what is meant by managing his own household. It kind of narrows the scope of the preceding broad qualification, which then forces upon a candidate's oversight of his children as he fills the role of a father and a householder. The way in which a man leads his household or rules his house indicates his capacity of leadership and capacity in government or governing. And that can be seen in the most obvious way where his children are in a home. One important aspect to note and to remember of managing one's family is to ensure, or manage his house well, is to ensure that his children behave properly. Children who are not accused, in Titus 1 verse 6, of riot or unruly. Riotous, unruling, disobedient children in any man's family will disqualify him from this office. Some of the translations in this verse 3, or verse 4 and verse 5, connected by verse 4, it says, with all respect and dignity. This clause is placed so that the children seem to be the intended reference here, and would mean then that the children should have respect and reverence for their father. However, the noun part of this, of respect, does not usually have a transitive quality. It's not transitive here, and it would refer to the father's own dignity. Supported by verse 2 of his the dignified appearance that an overseer is to have is an important qualification as well. The respectful attitude of the children, of his children, as they obey him, giving proof that he knows how to discipline in a good way. In verse 11 of 1 Timothy chapter 3, coupled with this as well, is he talks about the elders' wives. Women in like manner, or some translations, and that word is translated and use the word wife, must be grave, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. An elder's wife can ruin his reputation and his work. Therefore, she must be faithful as well, self-controlled, and one who is not a gossip. Often overlooked in looking at one who is to be considered for the office of an elder is his wife. She must possess the qualities of the fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5. She must possess or put on those things in Colossians chapter 3 that Paul talks about beginning in verse 12. She must possess those characteristics as well as her husband. Lastly, for this morning, the category of an elder is the habits then of his life. Chapter 3 of 1 Timothy and verse 2, again, he is to be temperate or vigilant. The Greek word, therefore, temperate there is a nepho, means to abstain. It is used figuratively. Discreet, sober, watchful, alert. The adjective in this is sober, means sober. And it can be used figuratively as being self-controlled or sober-minded. Thus, an elder then must be watchful and alert and avoid anything that would dull his senses as he shepherds the flock. Temperate, sober-minded. Orderly. In verse 3, it says he's not to be a brawler or given to wine, or striker. The Greek word for orderly, kosmios, describes a person who is modest in the sense of being moderate or well-ordered. Characterized by a sober outlook and self-controlled. Refers to clear-headed. He must be temperate, self-controlled in all things. Not only in regard to intoxicants, but also in regard to his mind. He must be spiritually temperate as well. Not a brawler or given to wine. Or not quarrelsome, the footnote there, not quarrelsome over wine. Strong's puts it in his description there. He says, not staying near wine. From these that Paul lays out here to Timothy and to Titus, I think it's clear from these qualifications that we've looked at here this morning, and these under here particularly of his habits of his life, that an elder should stay away from anything that is going to dull his senses or prevents him from thinking clearly. How is he to take care and watch over the souls of the church with a clouded mind or clouded judgment? The things of the habits then of his life are going to prevent him from ruling well or caring for the souls of the church. These qualifications that God lays out are not something that we can that we can take and look at and say, well, I'm going to leave this one out, or I'm going to take something else and put it in. These qualifications are not take them or leave them. These are absolutes. They must be had by the elder. So in this evening's lesson, we'll look at the rest of these and look at the character traits that an elder must possess for him to have and hold that office. If you're here this morning, though, we want to offer the invitation to you to come to God, either as one who has not yet obeyed the gospel of Christ, or as an erring child of God. We would urge you and plead with you to come to God before it's too late. The invitation song, as we sing here in just a moment, all things are ready. The question, are you ready? Are you ready to come to God? Are you ready to be obedient? Are you ready to walk with him? Are you ready to let your light shine and on and on? Things are ready. Are you? If we can help you this morning, or we can encourage you and assist you in any way to put Christ on in baptism, or as an erring child of God to repent of your sin and ask for his forgiveness. Now is the time, now is the opportunity. Won't you take advantage of it by the singing of this song while we stand and while we sing?